What's up, guys? Tougie here with my NHL season preview for the 2016-2017 season. Now, last year I actually had a pretty decent year predicting the playoff teams. 6 of 8 out of the Eastern Conference, because who would have guessed that Montreal and Columbus would be absolutely terrible, and 6 of 8 from the Western Conference. I had Winnipeg and Calgary in, and they, of course, both missed the playoffs. But in this video, we look to improve. We look to go for that perfect 16 out of 16. I will say this, though, seeing as playoff predictions are difficult enough, I'm not going to bother with point totals, and I'm not going to bother with individual awards, because who the hell knows? If you want to know my prediction, Connor McDavid wins everything. How about that? But getting into this, we are going to go division by division. I will go over all 30 teams, and will either place them on the bracket that you see now, or they'll be down below in the lottery section. Teams will be listed from worst to first, and I'm sure I'll only piss off a few people. So let's do this. We are starting off in the Central Division, and winning the division, it's the easy pick. It is the Chicago Blackhawks. Guys, it's Chicago. As lazy as that is to say, it's really all you have to say. The main area of concern for Chicago is the supporting role players. Corey Crawford isn't much of a question mark in goal anymore. The defense, while an injury could cause issues, the Brian Campbell signing is perhaps the best free agent pickup from this past season. So it does come down to the likes of Ryan Hartman, Vinny Hinostroza, and Dennis Rasmussen to really contribute. But I have Chicago finishing first in the Central. Next up, the St. Louis Blues finishing second in the Central. Can Jake Allen be the goalie that the Blues need him to be now that Brian Elliott has gone to Calgary? That is the big question. Defensively, it really comes down to Gunnarsson, Edmondson, or Robert Bortuzzo in that 6th spot to find success. And if they do, the Blues have the best defense in the game. Now, I'll say similar things about other teams, and I do believe those other teams' defense cores could be solid, but from an all-around perspective, especially with Kevin Shattenkirk still in the fold, the Blues window is definitely still open. Sure, they've lost their captain David Backes to Boston. Jaden Schwartz is having a lot of trouble staying healthy, but if they get solid seasons, much like Chicago needs to do from their lower guys, if St. Louis can get it from the likes of Ty Ratty, and especially new acquisition Nail Yakupov, they will be a playoff team again. Finishing third in the Central, it is NHL 17's pick to win it all. We have the Nashville Predators. I'm not going that far, of course. Pekka Rinne still needs to be the Pekka Rinne of old for this team to succeed. The success that they have in the season, or lack thereof, is mainly on his shoulders. The defense, of course, now Subban, Josi, Ellis, Ekholm, probably the most dangerous group of defensemen from an offensive standpoint in the NHL. If you can have Matt Carle return to form and have Yannick Weber, the new number 6 in Nashville, if he can find his game, they arguably have the best D-core in the game. And like I said, I know I just gave that title to St. Louis, but all I'm saying is Nashville can be deadly. To me, the offense is the question. You have Philip Forsberg, you have James Neal and Ryan Johansson, but you can place a question mark next to pretty much anybody else on this team. Will Mike Ribeiro rebound? What will Craig Smith do? I mean, there's a lot of questions. Colin Wilson, Calle Jarnkrok, you can go down the list. Nashville has a strong chance, and I have them finishing third in the Central. Finishing fourth in the Central, and they are a wild card team, we have the Dallas Stars. Another year with the same issues looming over them. Can Kari Lehtonen or Antti Niemi finally get it together? The offense is obviously there. It's just a matter of whether or not Tyler Seguin can stay healthy. They signed Hoodler to an amazing deal. The defense, though, still has some question marks. You need guys like Johns, Nemeth, and Oleksiak to really step up. The Stars could dominate. They may even compete for the President's Trophy, who knows? But if you were to tell me that they were going to miss the playoffs this year, I really wouldn't be surprised because of how big of an issue their goaltending is. Finishing fifth in the Central and occupying the second wildcard spot, we have the Colorado Avalanche. Now, this is a risky pick. If anyone thinks that they can confidently predict the Avs season, I will happily call them a liar. Who the hell knows what this team is going to do this year, especially now with Jared Bednar at the helm rather than Patrick Waugh. The Varlamov-Picard tandem could do wonders for them in goal, but they have so many questions. Varlamov is a question by himself. What will he do this year? Defensively, they can rely on Tyson Barrie, even Francois Beauchemin, Eric Johnson, and even Fedor Tutin, really. But what about the guys Jelena, Weirkoch, and Nikita Zadorov? In limited roles, the numbers don't lie. They're all solid players. If they can step their game up, especially Patrick Weirkoch, now that he's come over from Ottawa, the Avs are looking good defensively. And offensively, it's the same thing. A common problem you will have me mention for a lot of teams. You have the offense. Duchesne, Landeskog, McKinnon, whose stock has never been higher. Joel Colborne from Calgary is a good pickup. Carl Soderberg, while overpaid, is still an underrated player. It comes down to the bottom 6 guys and whether or not they can help lead this team to a playoff spot, and to me, they end up doing that. Now, obviously, since we have 5 teams from the Central making it, that means we have 2 teams from the Central that definitely haven't made it, and that brings us to our first lottery team in the West. It is the Minnesota Wild, and this was tough to have the Avalanche ranked over Minnesota. It's another new coach in the NHL, but he just so happens to be the best coach that the Wild have ever had, Bruce Boudreau. He took the fall in Washington, he took the fall in Anaheim, and now he finds himself with an interesting Wild team. On paper, they don't really have a weak spot. I think the defense is solid, the goaltending is solid if Dubnyk can perform to his level. It's just a matter of the offensive players performing, and that's a gigantic question mark, especially with guys like Pominville, Chris Stewart, and now especially Eric Stahl, who really needs to prove himself this year. But overall, I put my eggs into the Colorado basket, and I think they are a little bit more likely to make it over Minnesota. But obviously, I wouldn't be surprised if the Wild finish top 3. It all depends on how players perform, but for this prediction, the Wild are in the lottery. And that, of course, leaves one team left, the Winnipeg Jets. Another team on the fringe. The Central is strong, but they have too many questions surrounding them. Can Connor Hellebuck be the goalie that the Jets hope he can be? I mean, he's the man now, you would assume. Hutchinson is going to be the backup. Pavlik down to the Manitoba Moose. Defensively, they need really big rebound seasons from guys like Toby Enstrom and Mark Stewart, and hopefully someone like Josh Morrissey can prove himself to be ready this year. Offensively, they're a very dangerous team. Ehlers, Little, Perreault, Scheifele, and Blake Wheeler are almost guaranteed to have solid seasons, so the pressure lies with the rookies, Kyle Connor, Brandon Tanev, and the number 2 overall pick, Patrick Laine. But for me, that's too many question marks. The Winnipeg Jets will finish bottom of the Central Division. Moving on to the Pacific and finishing in first place, we have the San Jose Sharks. They surprised everybody last year. Just when it looked like their window was closed, they make it to the Stanley Cup final before losing to Pittsburgh. But even then, I don't know what to expect out of them this year. The defense is still in really good shape. It just comes down to players living up to their potential. In goal, can Martin Jones prove that last year wasn't a fluke? And can the offense, especially guys like Logan Couture, stay healthy? Can Thornton and Marleau continue to produce at a high level? Will Mikhail Bodker have a strong season? Same can be said for Donskoy, Hurdle, Carlson, Nieto, Chris Tierney. They have the talent to not only make the playoffs again, but to still be contenders. The only question is, will they? I have them, of course, finishing in first place in the Pacific. We'll see if that happens. Finishing second in the Pacific Division, we have the LA Kings. Can Jonathan Quick be the goalie that everyone still thinks he is? Is he a rocking goal? Yes, but it's not 2012 anymore. Defensively, they're good to go, whether it's Derek Forbort, Braden McNabb, or Tom Gilbert in that 6th spot. They will be all right. The big question for the early part of the season is how badly will the loss of Marian Gaborik affect them, and it wouldn't hurt if Dustin Brown could finally find his game and become at least somewhat recognizable to what he once was in terms of point production. And our third team in the Pacific and the final playoff team in the Western Conference, the Calgary Flames, with the goaltending situation finally figured out, hopefully, with Brian Elliott. The Flames are in a good spot. You, of course, have some defensive questions once you look away from Giordano, Brody, and Dougie Hamilton. Same deal on offense, really, when you look past Monahan, Goodrow, and Bennett. But they'll absolutely be contending for a playoff spot this season. So that brings me to the 4 teams that didn't make it out of the Pacific, and we start off with Arizona, who finished in 4th and just missed out on the wildcard spot. Can Mike Smith get it done? Can the defense for the Coyotes get it done? Obviously, Oliver Ekman-Larsson's amazing. Chychrun has apparently made the opening night roster, although he might only be around for the trial period. Alex Goligoski and Michael Stone are still solid NHL defensemen. It comes down to the Kevin Connaughtons, Jamie McBains, and Connor Murphys of this team to get it done. And offensively, it's a similar story. It's all about the supporting cast, but they have so much young talent. It's insane. If they don't get it done this year, they'll certainly get it done in the future if they keep going down the path they are currently on. Lawson Krause, Laurent Dauphin, Domi, Duclair, Dvorak, Reeder, Strome. Coyotes 2.0 will be an interesting team to watch this year. Finishing 5th in the division, the Edmonton Oilers. What the hell are they going to be this season? Talbot, to me, is still a question mark. The defense is absolutely a question mark, even with the addition of Larson, and now, especially with the addition of Chris Russell, who just signed. And on the offensive side, the big names have to contribute. Draisaitl, Eberle, Lucic, Nugent-Hopkins, Puljujarvi in his rookie year, and of course now Captain Connor McDavid. They've improved over last year on paper. But is that enough? Is that defense good enough? Is the supporting cast good enough for the Oilers to make the playoffs? Is that goaltending going to be good enough? For me, I say no. They're just a little bit off. Although the Connor McDavid factor is going to be huge. Moving on to one of the more surprising. I have 2 picks in this video that I think are really going to surprise people. And this is one of them. The Anaheim Ducks finish 2nd bottom in the Pacific Division. Randy Carlyle takes over. And Jesus, this team is just a mess. They could pull it together, but how did this happen? Gibson and Bernier in goal is a solid tandem. It's a great spot for Bernier, as he doesn't have the pressure of being a number 1 guy, but John Gibson does now, and that could be a problem. Defensively, Hampus Lindholm still hasn't signed, which leaves Sami Vatanen as arguably their best defenseman. You have Cam Fowler and Simone Dupre that need to have good bounce-back seasons, especially Fowler, whose advanced stats have been dropping season over season now. Josh Manson and Jacob Larson could contribute, but aside from them, you have Bieksa, Stoner, just massive anchors known as contracts tied to them, and Corbinian Holzer. That's a massive issue, and offensively, obviously no Ricard Raquel either. The Ducks have 2 of the 3 remaining RFAs, so what you have is just a team full of question marks, top to bottom. Getzlaf and Perry, what are they going to do? Vermette and the Chris Wagners of the team, what are they going to do? You have Jared Bold, Silverberg, the Ducks are going to be, for one reason or another, one of the more interesting teams to watch this year. And unfortunately, for the team that was my pick to go to the Stanley Cup final last year out of the Western Conference, I hope for the better, because I do like the Ducks out of the West. But I think this season's just going to be a disaster. And that brings us to the final spot in the Pacific Division. It is the Vancouver Canucks. Ownership is determined to make the playoffs, seemingly to pump and dump the franchise with playoff game revenue, and that's just not going to work. Miller and Markstrom are yet another questionable tandem. The defense isn't terrible, but it's far from great. They do have some good pieces, and the offense is just riddled with question marks top to bottom. There isn't a single player that's guaranteed to have a great season, even the Sedins with Louis Eriksson on that top line. So there you have it, guys. That is the Western Conference. Let's move on to the East, and we begin with the Metro Division. And winning the Metro, the defending Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins. With the recent addition of Mike Condon, the question is, will Fleury or Murray be dealt this season? It's an interesting It's an interesting situation. The expansion draft is a massive cloud that's looming over the head of every NHL team, especially Pittsburgh, but at the moment there's no denying that they have the best goalie duo in hockey, and if you hold on to them, you have a Stanley Cup winning goalie and a Stanley Cup winning goalie that you can interchange if one goes down to injury. Oh, you have a Stanley Cup winning goalie there to back him up. It's an incredibly fortunate situation. The defense is still in a good place as well, but hinders on the success of guys like Brian Dumoulin and Justin Schultz, who in fairness really stepped up their games in this past postseason. And much like Chicago, the big question is, can the supporting cast on offense keep up with the top lines and get it done? And despite the fact that there is now concussion concerns over Sidney Crosby, which is a huge factor in the potential success they'll have this season, it looks like it was a minor setback, so the Penguins are good to go. Finishing second in the Metro, we have the Washington Capitals. Unless an historic collapse happens, this team is back in the playoffs, no question. It's just a matter of whether or not they can get it done once they're there. Will Braden Holtby be as good as he was last year? I'd say that's debatable, especially with no major changes in the defense. Is that defense going to improve? Perhaps, but it's a question mark. At the end of the day, offensively, they're still looking good. You still have Ovechkin, Backstrom, Evgeny Kuznetsov had a great season last year, and they'll probably power this team to the playoffs. But can they get it done in the playoffs? I'm not sure. Finishing third in the Metro, and this could be considered a controversial pick, I have the New York Rangers, another team whose biggest issue is simply performing to their skill level. Offense, defense, goaltending. It simply comes down to whether or not they can perform to the best of their abilities. To me, their cup window is still open. They still have a chance, but that window's closing very quickly. They have to get it done this year, and they're going to start that by making the playoffs. Finishing fourth in the Metro, there is only one wildcard team from the Metro, and the New York Islanders are it. You do have questions. Can Jarro Halak be the guy? Can Thomas Greiss take the reins if he can't? That's really the biggest problem that the Islanders have this season, is the goaltending. The defense is solid, the offense, especially now with the youth injection of Barzal and Beauvillier, they're looking good. The big question is, and again, I said this would come up time and time again, can the big players perform, especially to Andrew Ladd, who replaces Kyle Okposo? I do have the Islanders making the playoffs, but who knows? It's going to be another interesting team to watch. So given that there's only one wildcard team from the Metro, we have four teams that missed out, and first up we have the Flyers falling just short. It's the story of the Eastern Conference, another team whose success depends on the players performing to their skill level. In goal, that statement certainly applies with Steve Mason and Michael Neuwirth. On defense, it definitely applies, although it will be interesting to see Shane Gostisbehere's sophomore year and how Ivan Provorov does now that he's made the team. And who knows, maybe Radko Gudas can stop being a goon because he actually knows how to play hockey, and maybe he should start. And of course, offensively, it hinders on the success of the big names, Giroux, Voracek, Schenn, Couturier, you know the names, but to me, the Flyers are going to fall just short. Next up, for the lottery teams, it is the New Jersey Devils. Corey Schneider gives this team a good chance to make the playoffs, period. But that defense is questionable on paper. A lot of unproven players that need to carry their own weight. Offensively, the addition of Taylor Hall is an obvious game changer, but it comes down to the question marks, which is basically everyone else. Whether it's veterans like Camilleri and Zajac, players who are approaching their prime like Henrique and Palmieri, or guys like Boucher and Devontae Smith-Pelly, who need to prove themselves sooner rather than later, or even truly unproven talent like Blake Spears and Pavel Zacha. The Devils have a lot of question marks. I have them falling just short. Next up, John Tortorella's Columbus Blue Jackets. If Bobrovsky isn't the Bobrovsky of old, the Jackets are doomed, just like they were last season. They have solid pieces on both sides of the puck, but for things to go right for the Jackets, every aspect of that team would need to be firing on all cylinders at the same time, and that's not too likely, especially with Tortorella at the helm. And finishing last in the Metro, we have the Carolina Hurricanes. Goaltending is still a huge question mark with Ward and Eddie Lack. Defensively, things are looking great for down the road. They have some very good pieces, some very solid prospects, and of course Justin Falk is already leading the charge. Offensively, there's talent, but they need a lot of players to overperform to push for the playoffs. Aside from the likes of Elias Lindholm, Victor Rask, Jeff Skinner having decent seasons, which is probably guaranteed, it's another case of needing the supporting players to perform, and I just don't think they have the right cast to do that. 4 teams down, 4 teams to go, 1 division left until we can finalize our bracket. We have the Atlantic Division, and finishing at the top, the Tampa Bay Lightning, surely to be the consensus pick to be perhaps the best team in the Eastern Conference. They're strong in every single aspect of the game. You don't need me blowing smoke to know just how good they can be. The wild card on this team, if Jonathan Drouin can play the way he did in the postseason, they're going to be amazing and very well could compete for the President's Trophy. Finishing second in the Atlantic, we have the Florida Panthers. Sure, the Jonathan Huberdeau injury is huge, but they've still put themselves in a great spot heading into the season. If Luongo can continue to perform at a high level, the Panthers are easily back in the playoffs. The defense has improved with the additions of Yandel, Demers, Pissick from Buffalo, and the young offensive core that still consists of Barkov, Bjugstad, Huberdeau, even Riley Smith and Vincent Trocheck, and they continue to get better. The Panthers are making the playoffs. And finishing third, everyone knows after those top 2 teams, it's kind of a crapshoot with who is going to make the playoffs out of the Atlantic. And for me, for the second year in a row, I say that the Montreal Canadiens are going to make the playoffs. You just cannot doubt a team that has a healthy Carey Price. If he stays healthy, you're good to go. Despite some interesting, we'll call them interesting offseason moves, they still have the best goalie in the world. Defensively, Shea Weber isn't PK Subban, but he's still a great defenseman. The question on defense, though, for me, aside from what players will perform or fall short, will be the line combinations. It could be a disaster if Markov and Emelin are kept together, so keep an eye out for that. Offensively, the talent's there, whether it's the proven point getters like Galchenyuk, Gallagher, Pacioretty, or Plekanec, or some of the question marks like Radulov, or even someone who could come out of nowhere and have a great season like Daniel Carr. The bottom line is the Habs have a great chance to make the playoffs, and I think they do. They finished third in the Atlantic. So that brings us to this. 5 teams left, 1 playoff spot remaining. I didn't have this team making the playoffs last year, and I was right in that assumption, but I do have them making the playoffs this year. In the second wildcard spot, the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference, you have the Boston Bruins. I won't go into too much detail because I'll have a video talking about the Bruins specifically. Will the defense be better than it was last year? It's arguable. They have the potential to be. Is the offense better than last year? While I'd rather have Louis Eriksson than David Backes for certain reasons, I still say yes. Or at the very least, they're at the same level. So overall, can the team that missed out on the playoffs for the second consecutive year by just such a small fucking number, there is a chance, and I do say that the Bruins sneak into the playoffs this year. Which means we have the 4 teams from the Atlantic who aren't making it. And finishing just outside the playoff structure, we have the Ottawa Senators. I've said it a million times at this point, it depends on the players. Craig Anderson's a great starting goalie. Can he get it done? The Ottawa defense, you have some question marks, but they can get it done, especially with Erik Karlsson at the helm. And we'll see what Dion Phaneuf does now that he can have a full season in Ottawa. And of course, you have the same questions with the offense. You do have Stone, Turris, Ryan, and Hoffman, but there are questions. We have the Ottawa Senators finishing just shy of making the playoffs. Next up, the Toronto Maple Leafs. The goaltending, it's improved. The defense has a lot of question marks, but it's arguably been improved, especially if Connor Carrick or Nikita Zaitsev make the team, or at least end up being on the team at some point in the season. The offense has undoubtedly improved, especially due to the influx of rookies. That's going to be huge for them. It's again just a question of how they perform. They're not going to make the playoffs, but they will not be last in the division. So this brings us to the point where we have 2 teams left. the Buffalo Sabres and the Detroit Red Wings. Now, of course, I've already established that Detroit's not making the playoffs, which means the streak comes to an end. And unfortunately for them, more than the streak comes to an end, they're going to have a terrible season, because next up we have the Buffalo Sabres. Now, I don't think Robin Lehner's the guy. That's debatable. Of course, you have a lot of question marks with the defense as well, whether or not they will succeed. And of course, who knows, maybe Evander Kane will have another tracksuit be thrown into a shower. There's a lot of questions surrounding the Sabres, but you can't deny that they've been improved. Kyle Okposo is a great addition. It's another team that needs their players to perform, and I do think they're going to fall just short. But that, of course, brings us to Detroit. I have them finishing at the bottom of the Atlantic, along with Anaheim. This was the other big pick. Will the streak finally be broken? I say yes. Petr Mrazek leading the way gives them a good chance, but the defense is definitely questionable. That's coming from a Boston fan. I know questionable defenses, and their chances really do hinder on the offense getting it done. And I just don't know if that's going to happen. Can Franz Nielsen get it done? Can Vanek get it done? Defensively, as I said, a lot of question marks. Cronwall already injured. I just don't think it's going to be a very good season for Detroit. So there you have it. That is the finalized bracket. And let's break this down quickly, because this video has obviously been going on long enough. We will start in the West with the first seed against the 8th seed, Chicago against Colorado. I'm not going to give a 4-game, 5-game, 6-game prediction. I'm just going to say who advances, and obviously it is the Chicago Blackhawks. The second matchup, the St. Louis Blues and the Nashville Predators. Sorry, Preds fans, things are looking good for you. But in the end, we have the St. Louis Blues advancing to the second round. Bottom half of the bracket, the San Jose Sharks and the Dallas Stars. We have San Jose advancing. And in the final matchup, the LA Kings against the Calgary Flames. We are going with Los Angeles. Moving on to the eastern side of the bracket, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning against the Boston Bruins. No, I'm not that biased. The Tampa Bay Lightning advance. We also have the Florida Panthers and the Montreal Canadiens, and the Florida Panthers advance. Moving down to the Metro half of the table, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins going over the New York Islanders, and the Washington Capitals advancing past the New York Rangers. So your final 8, Chicago, St. Louis, San Jose, LA, Tampa, Florida, Pittsburgh, and Washington. We'll move back to the West. Second round, Chicago and St. Louis, the two teams that can avoid each other. And thankfully for Blues fans, they will be advancing again. St. Louis gets the better of Chicago. And another matchup you just haven't been able to escape in the West, San Jose and LA. And for the second straight year, I have the San Jose Sharks and the St. Louis Blues in the Western Conference Final. Back on the East, the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers. Things are looking good for Florida, but they're just not as good as the Lightning. They advance to the Eastern Conference Finals yet again. And then Pittsburgh and Washington, the other big matchup you can't avoid. This was a tough pick. My heart said Washington. My mind said Pittsburgh. For the second consecutive year, we are going to have the same Final Four: St. Louis, San Jose, Tampa, and Pittsburgh. Now here's where it gets interesting. St. Louis and San Jose. Obviously last year it went the way of the Sharks. But this year, the St. Louis Blues will finally make it back to the Stanley Cup Final. And on the Eastern Conference side, the team going back to the Stanley Cup Final for the second time in 3 years, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Both teams get a chance for revenge. Both teams succeed. We get the opposite. We get the alternative matchup in the final. We have the St. Louis Blues and the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I won't sugarcoat it, for the second straight year in a row. God damn it. I will die on this hill. For the second year in a row, I am predicting that your Stanley Cup champion will be the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like I said, I think they're perfectly crafted. Their window, their time frame to win is now. They came close against Chicago. They had some injury trouble. They came close to going back. They had some injury trouble against Pittsburgh. This is the year where their pieces fall into place. The Tampa Bay Lightning will be the Stanley Cup champion in 2017. So guys, that is it for this monster of a video. Again, some interesting picks of mine, but who knows? You know, it's a prediction after all. You truly never know what's going to happen. But let me know down in the comments below what you think is going to happen this season. Could be a huge breakthrough, could be something as simple as saying, oh, I think Detroit's going to win the cup and you're an idiot, which someone's bound to say. But yeah, guys, I don't want this video to go on any longer. If you made it all the way through, though, you are a goddamn champion, and I appreciate each and every one of you. As always, guys, if you have enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, to continue following this series. I will see you guys soon. I will be talking NHL all throughout the season, and I'll be talking about the Bruins specifically throughout certain videos as well. But anyways, guys, again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.